Dear friends, good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome to the Fritt Ord Foundation. Just a few words about Fritt Ord, since not all of you may know about us. We are a private philanthropic foundation funding arts, culture, journalism and freedom of expression issues in general, mostly in Norway but also selectively internationally. I'm Knut Olav Åmås, I'm Executive Director of Fritt Ord. And we are so happy and privileged to see all of you here for this event entitled The Borneo Case and the Norwegian Connection. And we are here for a discussion about Norwegian banks and their role in Borneo and the Norwegian oil funds investments also in Borneo. A very special welcome to Mutang Urud and Clare Rewcastle Brown, who soon will be introduced. And tonight at 6 there will be a premiere of the new documentary film, The Borneo Case, at Vika Kino, as you might know. Documentaries are a very important genre for Fritt Ord, and I think it's fair to observe that it's becoming an even more important part of investigative journalism also. So we are happy to be one of the organizers behind tonight's viewing and this event, and the other partners will soon be introduced by our moderator, Jorgi Jensen, whom I will leave the floor to in just a few minutes. But first, we will have a previewing of 3 minutes from the film itself. Thank you and welcome again.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Knut Olav, for hosting this event. And I think we have actually made quite a right amount of people for the hall today. It's quite exciting to see all of you here. We're going to have the movie that you saw a little clip from now. The documentary is going to be shown at national television also after the show in Vika Kino. Everybody's welcome to Vika Kino, 6 o'clock today. I think there's still places left, so bring friends and family. What we're going to do here today is to present 2 reports which is launched today. One of the reports is about Norwegian banks and their involvement in companies that has a role in the deforestation of Borneo. The other report is about the oil fund. So we have both sides of Norwegian economy, which is in touch with the case of Borneo. The reports are a part of ethical bank guide of the Norwegian ethical bank guide. And the ethical bank guide is made by the international methodology, which also has launched the same reports in Sweden 1 month ago. So we have different experience from Norway and Sweden. We are going to have the presentation given by Pia Gaarder, who is a project leader of Ethical Bank Guide Norway. She's also head of the department at Fremtiden i våre hender, Future in Our Hands. And I will ask Pia to come up now. And no, sorry, that's not the issue. I would like to ask Mutang to come up. Mutang Urud, as we saw in the film, is a human rights and environmental activist. He has been active in the 80s and the 90s in Malaysia. His activism came with a steep rise. He was jailed in solitary confinement for expressing his opinions. Amongst many arenas where he presented his point of view, he also attended in Rio in 1992 at the Rio conference and voicing his opinion on the deforestation of Malaysia. And this caused him to go into political exile when he had lived in Canada for the last 16 years. And he has become a Canadian citizen, so now he is able to come back to Malaysia to visit the country. Could you please come up, Urdu, and tell us about... I would like to ask you to describe the life in Sarawak, if you could please.
Oh, okay.
Great, thank you, George, and again, good morning, and thank you for coming here to listen to me. Definitely, the issues that are affecting our people. I'll try to just be very brief. 8 minutes is not too long, isn't it? Because I need to give space. I grew up in the rainforest of Borneo, and where we hunt, where we fish, and when we go collect fruits and all sorts of things in the forest. And we also, survive from so many things in the rainforest. In the past, my grandfather, before he traveled to anywhere else and in a long distance travel in the forest, he would consult the eagle and call the eagle, even though the eagle is sitting down, nestling inside in the nest far away, high in the mountain somewhere. He said, "You come and tell us whether it is nice for us to travel, whether it is safe for us to travel or not." And then within every day, people would have to be open their ears to the sounds that are within the forest. When you go and look for fish in the small stream next down river, half a kilometer, for example, or when you want to go hunting, for example, you have to call the ngai, the small birds, and they are the one that flits around left to right in under the canopy. The eagles are really high, but the ngai are lower in this canopy. So because there's so many trees, so many things that block your view, your view of the future and the distance there. So you have to consult somebody who flies quickly there, and so that you know whether it's safe or not safe. So this was the kind of life our people used to live, and I'm trying to capture this for my government so that they understand our relationship with the land, and to understand why we want to blockade, why we want to stop the logging within our rainforest area, and the connection we have. I'm also now writing a dictionary about the language we have, so that the young people would not lose it, because language is how we convey our relationship with the land. And if we lost that connection, we lost our language, a lot of things, knowledge of the world, after our rainforest also disappears with it. I am from the Klabi tribe. We have been making farms in the forest for hundreds of years. I don't know whether I could say thousands of years, but we never destroyed the forest. And of course, there's the rhetoric of the government that we are the main culprit in destroying the rainforest. And we also share the same forest with the nomadic Penan, who probably 20 years ago, about 600 of them were nomadic. Now, not one of them in the last decade have been nomadic because of the logging industry. In 1980s and the 90s, I was involved in some of the first blockades on timber roads, and we were blockading more as a single family, as a small community, and then as a young man, you feel with so much enthusiasm, and you think there's no risk, and so you just kind of so excited, so naive about your possibility, how your capability. So we gathered a lot of different communities, because we know this was the only way to stop the logging company and to stop the authorities from going into our area. And the reason the community gave was that if somebody comes into your home, particularly here in the West, individual home, family homes, you have to lock the door. And so the forest is our home, and so we have to blockade the main road that were coming in, built by the logging company. So that was the reason. We stayed for 7 months, 9 months in some area, even though in the end, there were laws to arrest us and put us in jail. I've been put in jail because they could not find me at the blockade, but I was somewhere else. Well, suddenly what happened was that in the 70s we realized that the noise of the bulldozers were coming from everywhere, and we knew people were like going up into the mountains and near where we were farming, and we asked them, "What are you doing?" These were people from downriver, and they said, "Oh, we're just making some survey for the government." Later did we realize that they were cutting our land for blocks of cuts for the timber companies. after many decades of logging, it's still going on. If you look in the movie later on, constantly, even now, after 35 years, you still see the logging trucks passing us as you go along these rivers. As along this road. Of course, we live in the mountains, and this is the last place that the colonial government, the British government, would touch. And so, when we blockade, the community said, "Bring back the Queen," because the Queen and her authority did not, destroy the rainforest, whereas the Malaysian government destroyed the rainforest, and so the people said, really, heck with the government of Malaysia. In the name of nation building, of course, the idea of developing resources, the idea of developing the land, we, the indigenous community who live within the natural environment, are at the consequences at the other end of that nation building and also development work. There are basically 6 very huge logging companies that started in Sarawak. They are owned by Sarawakians, and they were the one who also were involved in a lot of corrupt practices within the government of Sarawak. And of course, this was starting in the 70s and then early 80s. We were considered the biggest exporter of logs into Japan, for example. I don't know how many percent comes to Europe, maybe 2%, 3%, I don't know. We also came to the source that were demanding for this timber, to Japan, to European Parliament. I went on a world tour to 24 cities in 13 countries in the 90s, trying to appeal to nations that buy this timber to stop buying it from our government, from our timber companies. But also the same timber companies are exporting their corrupt practices all over the southern countries, because the South government are much better to deal with, because their laws and regulations are much more relaxed, are much more plastic, much more negotiable, and can be corrupted. So these 6 logging companies from Sarawak also diversify themselves not only to logging but also into oil palm plantation, tree plantation, pulp and paper, and also even rubber plantations these days. Now only 10% of the forests in Sarawak are really truly primary forests that has not been disturbed, and mostly, of course, these are national parks, and of course there are some pockets within areas of the indigenous communities where these are still primary forests. Our rivers have been polluted. Just last month, the government of Sarawak had there was a big problem about miles and miles of logs blocking the river systems, because uncontrolled logging has been going on for decades, and all these logs are coming down and blocking the river, and which would be really dangerous for people who are traveling on the river. Once this block timber release, you can cause a lot of damage. Of course, the basis for all this destruction of the rainforest is the government colluding with the timber companies, and they go hand in hand. And you will hear from my friend how one of the, even from the clip here just now, how our Chief Minister Taib Mahmud, ruling the country for 33 years, have been amassing huge sum of money by collaborating and corrupting the nation. So I want to thank all the Norwegian NGOs that have been helping to organize this forum for us, and so we could expose you to issues, to events that are happening within our country, and hopefully that from here we're not ignorant about the issues affecting indigenous communities, not only in Malaysia, Sarawak, but also in other parts of the world, in Papua New Guinea, in Brazil, and a lot of other countries. Even though we speak so much about it, there's still so much issues, problem affecting indigenous communities. In the news, that a lot of the human rights defenders in South America are being shot and killed. And whether I feel safe to go home. I go home twice a year for the last 5 years because only become a Canadian citizen I could go home. I was a refugee for a long time in Canada. Do I feel safe going home? At times I do, most of the time, but at times I don't feel safe. But I always surround myself with a lot of people with me. But we have also colleagues who have been fighting against the destruction of the longhouse forest, against oil palm. And one day he was driving his four-wheel drive and stopped at the traffic light. Two guys on a motorbike came with a pistol and shot him in the back. And so that's how we feel whether we are safe or not safe. So at times we just do whatever you can and not think of those things. Thank you again.
Thanks, Mutang. At some point, I think it was when you started your engagement with the big dams, you also teamed up with Clare Rewcastle Brown. Clare is an investigative journalist. She's born in Sarawak. She's the founder of the blog Sarawak Report and also Radio Free Sarawak. Clare, as an investigating journalist, joined BBC World Service in 1983 and has since worked in different media corporations. Just to warn you, Clare is also has issued an arrest warrant by the Malaysian court for what is called activities detrimental to parliamentary democracy. But I could also assure you that Interpol has rejected the application of the Malaysian industry to have Clare on the red list. Clare, could you please come to the stage and yeah. In some of the interviews you have given, I think this was in an Australian interview in Australia, you talked about your childhood in Sarawak, which is the Malaysian part of Borneo.
Yeah.
Could you please describe the situation today for us?
Yes, well actually meeting up with Mutang was a delight in the course of this project because we realised we're the same age and we were climbing trees together at the same time, which is why we're both still passionate about Sarawak. And of course I remember a little paradise, you know, and then I went back to have my education and live the kind of life that you all live here in Europe. And was a very busy person, and although I never forgot about Sarawak, I didn't get back there until 2006, and I found a very different place. I found devastation. I remember flying out of Sarawak at the age of 8 on my way to boarding school for the first time, and flying over the rainforest for hours. This amazing view from the window of the aeroplane. And when I came back in 2006, I flew over the same territory, mile upon mile of oil palm plantation. You know, I had an idea. I knew that the logging had been taking place, and I'd been following Bruno's campaign in the 90s when I was a young journalist, but no one was interested in Europe in those stories. And of course, arriving finally for a conference in 2006, I realised that I couldn't turn away after that. I spoke to many local people, many local journalists, and I got a better idea of just how dreadful the situation was there and how little world recognition there was. And so really, as a matter of conscience, I couldn't turn my back. And that's, you know, as a journalist, what was I going to do if I was going to do something? And I'm delighted to be here at the Fritt Ord, who've taken a participation in this project now with the Borneo Case, because of course it was through media that I tried to make my stand on this. That was my skill. And it started as a bit of an experiment. you know, the internet had just hit in Malaysia, which was fascinating. And, you know, I'm a traditional old person in the world of journalism, and I was only learning about the internet myself at that time. But I reckon that, you know, I thought there was power here, but I wasn't quite sure what I could do. But I could see there was already a debate online in Malaysia, and that everyone was going online, and that this was suddenly becoming a medium whereby people could talk about what they really thought, because it was relatively free. The media, the official media in Malaysia, is heavily controlled. Malaysia's an interesting country because it's a very oppressive country, but it's very clever about keeping that oppression very subtle and below the perception levels on a global level. So, you know, there's a lot more interest in more overtly oppressive regimes elsewhere. But nobody could print anything in the mainstream media or broadcast anything without it being vetted and controlled. You can't print anything without a license, and you can't get a license unless the political powers that be give you permission. And you know, so therefore they even have news controllers who monitor the satellite channels that they have and snip out the bits of CNN and BBC that they don't like. And they get away with it. And there are not many countries that are that controlling. But on the internet, you know, I noticed people were saying what they were liked, and they could start up a site, and even more handy, it was still in English, a lot of it. So I thought maybe I'll participate. What I realized was that what was upsetting me was upsetting, particularly in Sarawak, you know, it was upsetting many people too. They were very, very, very concerned at the environmental devastation, the shocking loss of one of the most valuable places on our earth, wantonly and unnecessarily, and also the appalling human consequences for that. And planetary consequences. I'm sure I don't need to lecture you lot on the importance of rainforest in global warming. So I was aware that there was this outpouring, but it wasn't very disciplined, and it wasn't so effective, I thought. So I thought maybe I'll start up a blog, and I got a small grant, actually, from the Bruno Mansa Fund to start up an internet site. And I called it the Sarawak Report, because I wanted it to sound official. And, you know, and I brought the professional, you know, evidence-based journalism that I thought was needed to this debate. And I got to work and started digging. And you know, I came from an investigative programs. That was my mate. And you know, I know people like hearing, you know, if their leaders have misbehaved, you know, that people are interested. And the cause of this problem was misbehaviour by the leadership of Sarawak. There was very poor governance. So I got stuck into a subject that was really a bit of an elephant in the room at that time. No one discussed the corruption issues except like this. And I was saying, what do you mean you're saying there's 7 billion that this guy's got? In fact, I reckon it's 60 billion that's been accumulated by the ruling family that was controlling Sarawak for 35 years. But people were whispering billions. And I said, well, let's get this out here. Let's start looking at the evidence. And I used the internet to help me on that. We started working to basically track Taib's money. Taib Mahmood was the chief minister who you saw arriving in the helicopters earlier in that clip. Probably, you know, amongst the top 10 richest people in the world, secretly. He took a rainforest, and most of the profit from that. And it's, you know, it's easy money, it's lying on the ground. Plus all the other, you know, the palm plantation concessions. And we worked on really, you know, finding out what we could about his wealth abroad in Canada, great swathes of America, new towns in America are linked to him. Dylan's always happy to mention the FBI building in Seattle that's owned by the Taib family, several mansions, chunks of property in London, in Adelaide University where Taib went. You know, we started presenting these inexplicable signs of wealth and saying, how come he's so rich? So that was the first step. And then, of course, I started to get leaks. I mean, so I was starting to get information back from Sarawak, you know, information that should have been public, like the land concessions. the contract concessions, you know, which ought to have been in the library but were treated as if they were official secrets. And the reason why, as you start looking into it and putting two together, you can see that he was running the economy for his family. He was giving all the big concessions to his own companies. He was giving huge chunks of land to his various brothers and sisters. He had an awful lot of them. They were all very greedy. And they would hot potato them within a couple of weeks for a massive profit. You know, millions and millions made overnight by this family. And then, of course, the timber would come out, the palm oil plantation would roll out. So I was just covering this fairly relentlessly. And seeing where it would take me. And I was directing this at the local people. I'd given up on trying to interest the wider world, you know. I thought if anything's going to change, it's going to be here. We're supposed to be a democracy. It's a fake democracy, but there was an election coming up. We had an impact. I'd also started a radio station, which was very much the attempt to translate that approach into a medium that could be received in the distant villages like Mutangs, and we were working in Ibana Malay, and we were getting a lot of enthusiasm by the end. We were communicating these same stories, and people were picking them up on the radio. The churches in particular were collecting money to buy radios and then distribute them. We had to do shortwave in order to avoid the local laws. And so they were receiving shortwave broadcasts all about these issues, and then we were getting them on the radio. So they were able to ring on their hand phones. They would sometimes walk for many hours to get to the place they would know where they could get a signal. And then they would give us their problems, and we would broadcast it on the radio. They would hear their own voices, you know. It was very exciting for us. We felt we were offering empowerment. They really wanted to have their views out there and listened to by each other. They could then understand that, you know, the problems in this village were the same in that village. And in the process, I learnt a lot myself. I got to understand the dynamics of oppression in these sort of situations, how vulnerable the rainforest isolated communities were to those big, heavy logging gangs that came into their land. I mean, it's that hidden fear that pervades these communities, small communities on their own, facing big, heavy logging gangs who bring thugs with them to sort out people who oppose them. So therefore, you know, we created a new narrative in Sarawak, and the election came, and over 40% of the official vote, that's after the cheating, went to the opposition. You know, this used to be a 90% plus kind of place, and it gave a very big fright to Taib Mahmood, and in fact it gave a big fright to the government. So, I mean, the film tells how, you know, this guy was actually promoted out of office after 35 years. Everyone thought he would be carried out feet first from that job. So this was a minor victory to an extent, but again, you know, the control is still there because of the federal system. This is a state, and it's been kept in position by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who needs the political support and the financial benefits of Sarawak. You know, I will just speed forward to touch on where we went next, because we weren't going to get any further with this issue by just combating issues to do with state-level politics. I had to look at the corrupt system in Malaysia, and as a part of that, I started to investigate the personal corruption of the Prime Minister himself. We went on to, you know, there's been a very large expose that I was able to pull together, which showed that he's been instrumental in stealing $7 billion. 1 billion of which I was able to document went into his personal bank account in 2013, and he's been having a hard time trying to defend that. It's caused a political crisis in Malaysia, and really where we are now is we'll see where that goes. But where I hope it goes is that, you know, by presenting the people with what they'd always suspected but then now know, I hope that I've given them some of what they need to demand reform and a way of doing things differently, and maybe keeping hold of that last 10% of Mutang's jungle. That's what I'm about. Thank you.